So I've been spending weeks and weeks with this man as he's been at his house and I've been at my house. And now I am back at the radio station today, 600 ESPN El Paso, Lubingo Studios. But I'm looking at the Roswell Rockets t-shirt that Jay Jaffe is wearing from Fangraphs.com. It is great to see you again, my friend. Good to have you back. Following last week, how are things with the Jaffe household right now?
Doing all right, actually. Wife and I both got vaccinated for the first time last week, and so a bit of optimism that at least the worst of our little nightmare here is over, and looking forward to getting out of town for a few days. My daughter's on her spring break, and baseball season's coming, so things are looking up.
Tell me about what the vaccination process is like in Brooklyn. I know what it's like here in El Paso and the state of Texas. What's it like for you in New York?
Well, I went to the Javits Center, which is a big convention center on the west side of Manhattan, and it was kind of a surreal journey. I hadn't been over to that part of town in a long time, hadn't been through Penn Station, which is the main train hub here since the start of the pandemic a year ago. And you got to go a few blocks west of that to get to the center. There were street signs that were warning that the line started at 42nd Street and 11th Avenue, whereas the convention center is on about 34th. But there was no line like that. It was a place that's built for volume, and I know that people had to wait hours in line when they went. I actually showed up early in anticipation of this and was able to go from door to needle in about 10 minutes. Wow. It was surreal. I mean, it's just a huge place. I mean, they tell you to go check in at table 97 and then to go get your shot at booth 27. I mean, it's just like there's hundreds of booths there, volume, capacity for thousands of people. And I don't know how many, thousands of shots a day they're doing there, but it was a pretty slow day there, and, all very surreal. But I was glad to get it done. Didn't have any real side effects other than a bit of a sore shoulder that first day. And that's it. Looking forward to going back.
I've got good advice for you. So the way I handle the shoulder thing is just find a way to do some kind of manual labor or odd jobs with that shoulder. And what you'll be doing is you'll just be working it out the whole time. So that by the time it comes down to later that day, instead of just not doing anything and the shoulder stiffening up a little bit, it'll be worked out real good. And you won't even know anything was even poked into that shoulder. So.
Yeah, good call.
All right. Well, listen, I'm happy you got the vaccination. That's a good for you and the family, no doubt. And meanwhile, spring training is almost over. We've got a week before the start of the season. In fact, April 1st, when things kick off, it's hard to believe we're so close to the beginning of the 2021 baseball season, Jay, because a lot of storylines continuing, including the one that developed yesterday with Fernando Tatis Jr. avoiding serious injury when he abruptly left that spring training game against the Reds.
Yeah, I mean, boy, you just the range of things that could have been there. Really scary moment there. I mean, it was good that he wasn't limping off the field at least, but you just never want to see any player leaving the field in the middle of an inning like that, especially a star player and one who really has captured the attention of the public and the entire industry. And I'm glad it's just some shoulder soreness, and that this doesn't sound like it's the crisis that it could have been.
Agreed. And meanwhile, while the Padres dodged a bullet there, with Tatis, you kind of look at some of the major storylines right now heading into the season. And for the most part, there hasn't been any major injuries, knock on wood, yet that we've had to deal with. So, some players have played really well and had some great springs. Others have been a little slower out of the gate. You've always told us this year after year. We've been doing this for 15 years, Jay. You always say spring training stats mean zero. They mean absolutely nothing. It's all about what happens once the games begin April 1st.
Yeah, it's all about getting these guys the repetitions they need to be ready for the season. I mean, a guy gets bombed in an 80 pitch outing. The point is he got up to 80 pitches. That's, there's everything else is kind of gravy. So long as he feels, pretty good the next day. Yeah, he might have to do some work on that breaking pitch or whatever. But the point is that he's ready to go 95 pitches the next time out or whatever. and that he'll be okay. Likewise, these guys getting swings, seeing live pitching, it's all about that. I don't think there's really much you can take from spring stats. I know people have studied it. Huge power outbursts. I think the one thing you might take is velocity readings, or could be interesting. Exit velocity readings could tell you if a guy is gaining in his maximum exit velocity. Will tell you if his raw power is increasing or if his fastball velocity is increasing. But a lot of pitchers are fairly conservative about that stuff, and they're not throwing 100 miles an hour or whatever this time of year. Although Jacob deGrom certainly does seem to be, and likewise Shohei Ohtani. So
yeah,
it's good to know that Ohtani's healthy. I think that's what that's telling us.
I'm excited about Ohtani, especially since he's hitting for himself when he pitches. I think that's fun. Leading off, that's kind of cool to see for the Angels and the way they're playing him. And I'm happy you brought up deGrom, because you wrote about him at Fangraphs.com about how he could be paving a way into Cooperstown with how dominant he's been. And you're right; those numbers are triple digits. He just looks like he gets better and better every single year. And you kind of wonder, Jake's been doing it for a while, but then I look at a guy like Felix Hernandez, who dominated the game for so long and had such heavy use to where when he fell off completely. And now, Jay, his Cooperstown case is pretty much non-existent, where we all thought maybe 10 years ago that he'd be a lock.
Yeah, it's a shame about Hernandez. Really a lot of fun watching him when he was a young pitcher. Heavy workloads, not like insanely heavy workloads, but heavy workloads in the context of where the industry's at now. I think, though, the big thing is you talk to people in the industry, and I don't think he was as serious enough about conditioning as he should have been. He gained weight. He lost steam with his fastball. He didn't do the types of things in the off seasons that pitchers need to do to maintain their edge. And I think, he's reached the point now where his velocity is just about unsustainable, as in a starting capacity. So I don't know. I mean, look, if I'm him, I'm going to Driveline in the winter time. I mean, it's right there in Seattle, and working with those weighted balls and trying to figure out, how to get that edge back. I don't know if deGrom has done exactly that, but he has found ways to pick up a little bit of velocity. He already had excellent mechanics. You don't gain velocity without having really clean mechanics. He'd never thrown 100 miles an hour for a pitch, in an official game before 2019, and he did it like 30 something times last year, after doing it twice in 2019.
It's very true. Hey, meanwhile, the question came in off the air from Carlos. He wants to know, Jay, since Cano is out for the Mets, speaking of the Mets and deGrom, will Jeff McNeil slide over to second for them this season?
I think he'll get the majority of his reps at second base. I think they'll utilize his positional flexibility to fill in at third base in the outfield corners when it suits them. Luis Guillaume is a guy that they like a lot. They'll try to find some at-bats for him at second base. J.D. Davis is kind of an iron glove at third base. McNeil can play there. McNeil can play either of the outfield corners. I know Dominic Smith is a bit of a liability out there in left field. But I would expect him, McNeil, to be the regular second baseman right now.
Jay Jaffe back with us from Fangraphs, and you can follow Jay on Twitter at J_Jaffe. And if you've got questions for him like Carlos just sent, please give us a call, 880-5763, or we can always read your questions on Twitter as well. Now, Jay, a lot of good fantasy information. The positional power rankings for catcher. It's probably not necessarily a fantasy-related story, but everybody on Fangraphs tackling different positions all over the diamond. And I like this because we just had second and third baseman come up, and now you've taken care of the catcher position, which went up earlier today.
Yeah, this was a super interesting one. I had not done the catchers before. This is my fourth year that I've contributed to these, and I've gotten my way around the diamond, but I'd never done catchers. And really what we've seen with the catchers is the emphasis on pitch framing, and we now have our own pitch framing metric. And what the effect has been, that the industry-wide use of pitch framing metrics is, to recognize the best and the worst, has created has had an effect on the player pool. A lot of the good hitting, bad fielding catchers are gone. Some of the worst of them, guys like Ryan Dumit, who really were just so bad at framing. Jorge Posada was another one. They just, their lifespan as catchers pretty much ended as soon as those metrics became, commonplace in front offices. And so the offensive, the bar for offensive contributions has gone down by about 4% relative to just the league average hitter. You can get away with being a worse hitter so long as you're a good receiver. And so that was kind of interesting to chart that and to write about. Boy, there's a lot of anonymous, seemingly anonymous backup catchers in the world. You'd just be surprised how many there are. Virtually interchangeable. They can all do, some things, but not everything to hold down a job. But it was interesting to drill down to some of these guys and see what it is that separates the good ones from the not so good ones.
It is, because we always think about fantasy stats with catchers. We don't always think about pitch framing. And that's really interesting because there's names near the top of that list that would otherwise not nearly rank as high. But when you factor in their offense and their defensive metrics, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it also, it's what separates the best of them from the pack. I mean, like a guy like Yasmani Grandal who can hit and who's very good at pitch framing. You also see, JT Realmuto, a guy who's kind of a latecomer to catching and just tracking the improvement of his pitch framing metrics over the life of his major league career, and you can see how he got that big contract.
Speaking of big contracts, I wasn't expecting the Astros to hand out a 5-year, $85 million extension today to Lance McCullers Jr., but that's exactly what they did. It'll kick in next year since he's already under contract this year for $6.5 million. Give me your thoughts on that. When you look at McCullers, he's definitely not the best pitcher that the Astros have, but they decided they want to make sure he stays in the Astros uniform throughout at least the majority of this decade.
Yeah, the Astros are a team in transition right now. And, losing Justin Verlander to Tommy John surgery, and he's going to be a free agent this winter. They've got something of a gap with their pitching. I mean, Zach Greinke will be a free agent this year. They already lost Garrett Cole. Who is going to be the stud in the next Astros rotation is a giant question mark. So, they signed Jake Odorizzi. He was a guy who made sense for them even before the Valdez injury. Getting him out for multiple years as a mid-rotation guy made perfect sense. Locking in McCullers for 5 years, I think now you can see some continuity emerging there. They're still going to have to go out and find some good pitching. I know that they've got a lot of young arms and they're high on some of them, but the rest of the industry is maybe not as convinced that it's going to be enough for them to sustain this run that they've had, especially now that they've shed George Springer and could be shedding Carlos Correa. Speaking of extensions, I know that they reportedly made an offer to him. So this is very much a team in transition.
Give me your take on the story regarding baseball trying to crack down on foreign substances on baseballs. This has been going on forever, but now all of a sudden, because they're looking at spin rates and everything else, they've suddenly decided they want to study balls out of play and see how much stuff is being put on those baseballs, Jay.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of intermittently been in the news for the last several years. We've seen incidents where, players and broadcasters have thrown around allegations about whether a guy is using some kind of gunk. Usually it's sunscreen and some other and rosin or something like that to help his grip, and whether that could be affecting spin rate. There's, on the one hand, there are perfectly innocuous explanations. Grip does seem to be a problem, especially there was a phase there when as Major League Baseball has altered the construction of the baseballs in conjunction with Rawlings. There was a couple of years ago, there were a lot of complaints that the ball was too slick. And so that increased the impetus for pitchers to try to search for something to add some tact to it. I know Major League Baseball is experimenting with the surface of baseballs to find balls that don't need to be rubbed up with the special mud before games. A couple years ago, Trevor Bauer demonstrated the way that that loading up a ball could affect its spin rate, and basically it came out and accused the Astros of doing so. The Astros have been kind of a forward-thinking organization that was emphasizing high spin fastballs, but the allegation was that they were achieving this artificially. And then Bauer went out and registered some very high spin rates and was kind of almost as open as Gaylord Perry talking about loading up baseballs 50 years ago. And I think it was an inevitability that Major League Baseball would get around to this. Obviously, it wasn't a priority last year during the pandemic. I think it'd be interesting to see what they find. I suspect they're going to find that this is, not uncommon. It's probably something that needs to be dealt with. I don't know that leveling out penalties is necessarily the way to go. I mean, if pitchers feel like that they need, a better purchase on the ball to grip it without worrying about it slipping out of their hands, then the studying the surface of the baseball has some merit to it. I think there's also there's a sense that pitchers should be allowed to have some kind of access to substance like that on the mound. But at the same time, if it's being abused, yeah, you got to crack down on it. I mean, I think doctoring the baseball is kind of the most accepted form of quote unquote cheating, more in the rule bending. It's by the book. It's obviously not legal, but it's often been dismissed with a wink we see relatively few players actually suspended for it. But I will be interested to see what they find. I doubt there's going to be any really major penalties that come of this. Be very interesting if they catch if Trevor Bauer's fastballs suddenly don't have as much spin as they did the last couple of years when he was excelling, and when he earned that big contract with his Cy Young season last year.
Very true. And you've got some great stuff coming up this week on Fangraphs.com, especially. I'm looking forward to your piece on Ronald Acuna Jr. I think that's going to be terrific.
Yeah, we have a great one of my colleagues, Dan Szymborski, does this is the ZiPS projection system. It's one of the two projection systems we use for our power rankings and our other other forecasts. Dan and I do a lot of collaboration where I'll ask him, what are the next 15 years of Juan Soto look like? What are the next 15 years of Ronald Acuna Jr. look like? And he's got a well-established projection system that's one of the longest running ones in the industry, and spitting that out and talking about a guy's Hall of Fame chances or talking about a guy's contract odds. It's a fun collaboration. The one for Acuna, I think if I have it correctly, he's maybe the second or third highest projected guy over the next few years and projects to be a 6 to 7 win player for the remainder of his 20s. Just, we've kind of forgotten about him because he was on the same team as Freddie Freeman, who won the MVP award last year, and Marcelo Zuna, who had a huge year. And he's only a year older than Soto and Fernando Tatis Jr. So he's kind of lost in the shuffle there. But he is one hell of a player. And just being reminded of that in writing this is a lot of fun.
Before we get to your beer pick of the week, this question came in on Twitter from Ray Work Productions. He wants to know, Jay, what's your opinion on Gary Sanchez? Will he recover from the year he had last year? And then he tweeted, am I the only Yankees fan who is frustrated with his laziness behind the plate? So Gary Sanchez, give us your thoughts.
Well, I bristle at the idea that Gary Sanchez is lazy. I think there's the perception that he is lazy is completely unfounded. The guy works his ass off trying to improve. He spent a lot of last off season working on a new catching stance that was supposed to help him do a better job blocking the balls while maintaining his ability to frame the balls. It didn't entirely pay off in one season. He had a miserable year. There's no disguising how badly he had fell on his face with the bat. We've seen some positive signs this spring training. I think that this is a pivotal year for him. The New York media loves to drum up the idea that Kyle Higashioka should be starting ahead of Sanchez. There's no way in a million years Higashioka is good enough to do that. Sanchez has tremendous power. He is an adequate defender. He used to be a better defender. Excellent pitch framer. Not so good blocking. But I think that the extent to which he catches abuse from the local media and this perception of laziness from fans, I think is just way overstated and grossly unfair because he's working on this stuff all the time.
All right. Let's wrap it up. Beer pick of the week, Jay. Before we get to your selection, I'm going to show you this one from Hess Brewing Company out in Phoenix. This is the Papago Orange Blossom. Now, Jay, this is a wheat beer. I've got vanilla, citrus notes, a lot of great orange. I mean, I'll tell you, and they sell these 6-packs at Total Wine for like $7. So, in all honesty, if you want to just load up and pick up some great beer, it's an easy drinker. It's hot in Phoenix, Jay, but I love this Papago Orange Blossom. So that's going to be my recommendation for a beer pick of the week. Look for it and get it if you're in Phoenix. I don't think they sell this in El Paso, so it might only be Arizona distribution. So if that's the case, you got to find it when you're in AZ. What about you? What do you have for us this week?
All right, the one I got this week is it's from our friends at Threes Brewing. This is their What Might Have Been. It's a Helles lager, so it's kind of very Pilsner, German Pilsner like. This was a really nice example of the style. A little bit citrusy on the front end, crisp and refreshing. 4.7% ABV. I called it the summer banger last year. It's just one of those easy drinking beers that you probably, could, if you put a 6-pack in front of somebody and gave them all afternoon in a hot yard, they could probably finish it off without too much trouble. I really like it a lot. I think that Threes does as good a job with their lagers as they do with their IPAs, and I'm looking forward to getting some more.
Man, I'm hoping Threes Brewing gets national distribution and starts coming out here to El Paso. That would be terrific.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right. Listen, great stuff as always, Jay. Enjoy the conversation. Enjoy the time. Look forward to next week. We get to have you back right before opening day. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds good.